I've always tried to understand the world underneath everything, because that's really what's going on. I mean, we live on the surface, and unfortunately, I think that the culture that we live in is also absolutely obsessed with surface now, surface reality. But that isn't reality.
It's not reality. It's AI. We just need to accept it, right? Case number 1, Geoffrey Laurence, artist. Career of 56 years, work shown in museums around the world, lots of private collectors, lots of experience and training, all of his life's work taken by AI. And all he's asking for is, what do I do? Why didn't I have a say?
What is going on is that you are experiencing the outside world, analyzing it, and changing it. That's not what machines do. Machines can only reflect what they gather. That's why I don't like AI, because it's not truth. It's not human vision.
And why does it put out work that's not even close to mine? Which is ironic, because that's the same argument Getty Images is making against stability. Sven Werner, who has a Substack called My Digital Truth Futuristic, commented on my last post and said, I think you need to check how the New York Times is getting things out and how maybe misleading their statements are in their legal work. And we're going to dive into what he said, because not only is it so true, he showed me something that was so obvious that I looked through piles of legal documents and couldn't see, even though it was right in front of me. AI copyrights, first you get angry, then you get curious, and then you do something. I'm Declan Dunn, and this is the AI Optimist. When you follow the money trail, like I have when looking into these lawsuits, it tells a completely different story, and one that has so little to do with Geoffrey and every other artist, creator, influencer whose work is training AI and doesn't have a team of lawyers to go address it. But it was this little case of something that seemed to make no sense or impact that is really getting ChatGPT and all the others nervous, because if fair use doesn't apply, then it's open season on OpenAI. So let's open our first case file. Thomson Reuters, owner of Westlaw, created a valuable legal research system with human-written headnotes summarizing key points of law. This represents decades of expert legal analysis summarized into their whole system. Now, Ross Intelligence was founded by someone who had actually worked at Westlaw. He went back to Westlaw and asked them if he could license some of their content so he could train his AI. He intentionally did not want to output any of their content he wanted to use to make the AI smarter, and Westlaw, seeing him as a competitor, said no. So being the smart AI startup, and if you're an AI startup, listen up, of course, Ross Intelligence went around to what are called third parties. These are brokers that sell data. Now, I've talked to you about this a few times, but it's really important we understand why this matters, because most of the AI infrastructure is built on purchasing data. When you buy from a third party, the third party supposedly will verify the quality of the data, will be able to stand behind you if you have any problems, and make sure that the person or business, in this case, Westlaw, is treated well and everything's good and they know what they're offering and how it goes out and they sell it. So Ross Intelligence goes there and orders 25,000 or what are called bulk memos. And in legal terms, bulk memos are basically legal arguments, pros and cons about a specific case. So with that, he buys these bulk memos with data from Westlaw that Westlaw provided to this third party. All good, nothing wrong. Now, Westlaw found out about this probably because as I looked it up, I asked, what's a little amount a year? Would be like 5 or 10, and a lot for a big firm might be in the thousands, but it was more likely hundreds. I mean, it's impossible to say. depending on the cases, but certainly 25,000 at one fell swoop is a giant order for bulk memos. Now, he was using those bulk memos not to get the content or to create or steal content from Westlaw. It was used for AI training. As we've said, AI learning. That's how they saw it at Ross Intelligence. Thomson said these are copyrightable. Now, what's interesting is this goes to one of the key objections from AI engineers is that we can put anything in. Once it's in, we transform it into these things called tokens, and that's that. That transformation argument doesn't apply here because they knew that the content went in to Ross Intelligence. Why? Because they sell it. They can probably get the records from the third party, and if it was an order that big, they might have noticed. These are a lot of what ifs, but there's many ways to know when something goes in. Now apply that to AI, because what they said was they didn't have to prove it like the New York Times creating outputs like we'll look at the next section. They didn't have to prove it like Getty showing images that we'll look at in the third section. They just had to say, here it was. They bought these bulk memos. The data was from Westlaw. That's our copyright. We don't approve of this. Please take this down and take it out of your AI. And this is the one that shook the heck out of Silicon Valley because for the first time, a judge found in favor of them. Thomson Reuters, Westlaw won the case against the fair use defense that Ross said, and also against the defense that they bought it from a legitimate third party. I mean, of all things, that's almost like having a third party validate a good thing, bringing people together if you think buying data is a good thing. But take away what happened there. If you're an AI startup, if you're managing data and you purchase it and you think everything's fine, you're going to want to check that. The Thomson Reuters Westlaw decision is against fair use. And it's before it went in. And the fact that it went in didn't mean it couldn't get out and didn't mean that the only violation of copyright was an output. The violation was before it even went in. Now apply that to every big lawsuit you hear, especially like the New York Times and Getty that we're going to get into in just a bit. And you start realizing the sand is shifting. Deals are being made all over the place. And these lawsuits are teaching us to follow the money trail and see where's the value. Now, the New York Times versus ChatGPT I've referenced several times, but I also found an interesting comment in my last episode that challenged the way that I framed the New York Times content being able to be pulled out of ChatGPT almost verbatim. I quoted 85%, which was what was quoted in the legal documents. And if you look at them, we'll show you a whole bunch of them from what's called Exhibit J. There's just tons of them. And what you see are these small little snippets. Remember that word. These little snippets, little like pages. They put a sentence or two, said, here's the beginning. Now, can you tell me what the next sentence is in the article? These are all using articles printed by the New York Times. And so they showed them, but they were all short snippets. I didn't see one single article, which is what I was prompted by in the comment to take a look at it because Sven Werner, who runs his own Substack, was talking about New York Times being misleading in the way they positioned it. So I went in and I'll talk to you about the Guy Fieri viral comment that I saw and that showed a lot of content that was similar. If you're watching on the screen, you can see it. All it is a bunch of text. If you see it highlighted in red, that means what's similar. So here it is. Guy Fieri has, I think it was about an 85% accuracy rating. New York Times says this is one of hundreds. They show example after example and say, look, they're taking all our content. But not once did I see the complete article pulled out, but I didn't even think about it until I went to Sven's blog, who was also looking at it and saying, wait, this is not an entire article. This is a snippet. In fact, what was pulled out, he compared to the actual article. Great article he wrote, by the way. You should read it. And he found about 20% was used. So 20% of the article had 85% violation. But remember, the New York Times was doing all sorts of things to influence the output, including things most of us can't do today. But his argument was that the New York Times also claimed memorization. And he shows within A standard large language model, this is really basic. I should have been looking at this myself. Large language models do what's called reconstruction. They put together different pieces, starting with tokens, putting together words. There's a whole science to it, but nothing is actually sitting there, like the New York Times claims, in memory. And so he had a great point about memorization, is that that's actually reconstruction of a pattern, because let's say we're looking up Hamlet, to be or not to be. We're going to obviously find that passage. We could probably find the whole play. Now that's non-copyrightable, right? That's old. But the same thing applies to a New York Times article, or especially one written about Guy Fieri that went highly viral on social, that had lots of people writing, commenting, putting stuff out. All of that makes it a higher probability that that content would have been in ChatGPT. So what I got from that Substack article by Swen was an eye-opener that this is not only misleading, but they're not really pulling out full articles. The way they're doing it is not the way a normal user would do it, or could do it now. If you paid $20 a month at ChatGPT, I shouldn't say this, some of you are great prompters and hackers, maybe you can do it. But for the general public, it would take an enormous amount of work to try to reproduce what's already been created. This case is not about copying snippets. It's about the New York Times versus ChatGPT and the competition for so many things that the New York Times creates. Of course, they don't want ChatGPT to take it in, and this suit has been going on a while. So remember that right now, there's all sorts of media companies, large ones, that have settled. Axios, Axel Springer. There have been a lot of media companies that have settled with OpenAI. Clearly, what these lawsuits generally end in is licensing. So the one standing, the New York Times, is trying so hard to prove on the output, because it usually tells me they can't really prove on the input. And a lot of the scraping and buying of data and billions of data points, ChatGPT may become a news source. ChatGPT may take subscribers away from the New York Times, or at worst, if you could go into ChatGPT and get the New York Times without paying them, that's obviously what all this is about. At some point, they should play together, but judging of the length and the intensity of both sides, and everyone watching this is the case, it's surprising not to see some major licensing deal come out of it, because the text that they're showing are not yet complete articles, they're snippets. And does AI have the right to show excerpts and portions of things that have been around social media and the cultural milieu for so long, they become almost self-evident, easy to find? Or is that just another AI hustle to avoid the responsibility of the content that went in them? Our third case file. Now, it might be the most compelling, but in my opinion, might have one of the largest rewards available. Because while New York Times may have had content taken, which is its brand, and while Thomson might have had bulk memos, which honestly is its brand, Getty Images, in my opinion, actually had its brand taken by AI. They are known to be very, very adamant about their content. Anything they have, you are not allowed to use without paying them. And they have very smart attorneys and bots and emails, and just look back. There's like a Wayback Machine on how long this has gone on. So to go out and strip those initially, first, big mistake. But what they do is, as you look, and you can see on your screen, I'm showing you some examples that have been output, according to the legal documents from Getty, by Stability. And it shows their brand name, and it's on this like black banner. It has Getty Images, often with the photographer. This is how they do their watermark on top of their images. Now, what's really crazy, their watermark, if you look at the valuation of the current Getty Images, which just merged with Shutterstock in January 2025, it's around $3.5 billion. So let's say that's what the brand's value is, because this is a brand value. That Getty Images is not only being put on images that, let's say, may assumedly have been scraped from Getty Images, which does look like it's happened, but images can be very similar in photography. But still, there's Getty Images. And not only that, it shows up on images that aren't Getty Images because, well, if you have a black Getty image across all these images that's consistent and it starts popping up, you're now taking the brand, not only the image, but the brand and putting it on, which is why this case probably has the highest ceiling of all of them, in my opinion, because this is actually a name that's not only put on work, but inferior work and weird work. Of course, they're showing the horrible examples, but it's clear the scraping was done. And you can't hide when your brand name keeps popping up in all the results. It's like you don't even have to prove it. It's in there. So what Getty Images can do with stability is going to be impacted, though, by the copyright law. We'll have to take a look at it for stability, but assume it's UK rules. US rules apply for Getty Images, who's certainly worldwide. So that alone is going to impact how this is judged, how the training can be used, can it be used for training, and was there copyright violation? When you follow the money trail with Getty Images, you clearly see that the impact on brand value could be huge if you started having these things generated. And odd thing about all these cases is the New York Times, Getty, all of this happened a few years ago, which is very, very different than now. Our 3 case files. Well, case file number 1, training, using content to train AI, even without displaying it, can be infringement. Thomson Reuters. Intent matters. Building direct competitors with someone else's content will face a little scrutiny, but think about it. Is there a competitive edge? Data is going to become even more rare as people start realizing that the real value of AI is in the data and your intent. See, even though Ross Intelligence did not intend or even want to output anything, the training helps the output. That's how I read the court seeing it. The training still maybe doesn't give you exactly that, but it gives you something that's way smarter because of the value of the copyrighted IP from Westlaw. But if you're looking at it just like any business, follow the money trail. And if you follow the money trail in Thomson, it's really clear competitor buys data, even though it's legal, copyright still rules. Now, the New York Times is saying that their data was taken, and they can show a lot of short examples will, like Authors Guild v. Google, show us that those snippets don't really impact the total value involved here. And that is a really, really tough judgment, especially for some media company with the history and quality of the New York Times. So with all that data, what you're really playing for is 100 years of data from the New York Times that people have read that do become patterns. But if you could get exact articles out, if you could pull them out, you could actually argue it's in there. But is it real if you can only pull out a little piece of it? Does that prove copyright infringement? That's one that's going to be decided. 3 cases that tell one story. Thomson Reuters showed that even without visible output, training AI on copyright material is still infringement when building a direct competitor, that competitive angle. It was a special kind of startup move by Ross Intelligence. I sort of admire it. After being denied a license, he gets 25,000 bulk memos by going to a third party. It's nothing wrong with it. It's totally legal, and it's sort of surprising they caught him because most companies find out that their content's been taken way after it's already been put in AI. This was found out pretty quickly, and they had a strong case because it was already proven it was in there from the purchase and the records, so they didn't have to do the output dance. So output is not the only thing determinative of copyright, and that is massive for the AI industry. That is, input has been the holy grail, that we get it, it's copyrightable, but it gets transformed. All good, only on output. This is on input. See, the New York Times deals with partial outputs, snippets that mimic the definitive style of their journalism. Their claim that those articles are memory, not so true. Yes, AI can reconstruct patterns that come up again and again. But if all you're proving is these articles are in there and there's snippets of them, and you're one of the most famous media organizations, will the snippets, if it's 20% as a general rule, will that be enough to prove damage? The Getty's image case provides the actual easiest, most visual evidence. There's Getty's logo right on top, even sometimes with the photographer's name right below it, with weird images that have distorted faces and glitches and hallucinations, which of course implies that their brand is associated with that. This is even better than scraping. When your brand gets associated with something negative, it's not good for you, but it's extremely good for you in court, in my opinion, because there's nothing stronger than brand in companies of Getty Images' size. That's the alleged taking, even more than the content, is the brand. And that could impact this at a level that is, I think, much higher than the other claims can be, but who knows? These economic realities, not abstract technical or legal principles, are going to define it because we don't have the law. The tech is brand new. So how else are we going to define it except for where the money trail goes? This is when AI becomes business. As much as it's easy to say to all you startups, keep going, if your startup is going to go, it's going to go. And if it goes because it bought data, or this whole issue really impacts the bigger players that everyone's wrapping around, it would be thermonuclear. And I don't think it will be that. But how do we actually correct what is obviously a wrong? Listen to Geoffrey.
This AI picture, this AI painting, where is the real emotional contact in that? I mean, Wonder Bread is not bread.
The difference between surface copying and deep understanding matters. Not just in art, but in how we build AI. That's the money trail worth following. Because you may think it's easy to lose the creative element. There's a cost to that, and it's not just financial, it's human.